Hi there. In this video, we will explore how we can update data using DBIx. Let's get started. Now, a simple method you can call is called update. And for example, if you want to update all the records, you can do schema. So capital schema, we access our result set, which would, let's say, be user in this case. So we want to update our users. And then you can call the update method. Now, if you do this, what you provide to the update is a key and value pairs where the key is the column name and the value is the value you want to set. Now in our case, if we just supply result set and call the update, that means we would update all the users. Now currently we have 2 users in our database, and let's say we want to change the type. And the type we can set here is just custom for sake of example. So we can say update type and the value is going to be custom. Now if you run this through dbic_trace for debugging, Perl include libraries and then the script, we're going to see that we are updating all the users and we're just setting the type custom. And if you refresh the phpMadmin, we're going to see the type has changed for all the fields. Now, when you call the update method on a result set, you're directly invoking the SQL. Meaning, in the previous video, we talked about that there are methods that first fetch the row and then call specific methods such as update or insert on them, triggering additional data modifications. Update method wouldn't trigger the data modifications as well because it just executes the SQL directly against the database. Now, of course, you're not just limited to calling update on all the users' result set. You can add a method such as search result set. We can specify that we want to search for all the users where the username is. If we check the database and let's say we only want to update user 1, and we can say update all the users where the username equals 1. And if we run this, what we're now going to see that we're setting the type to custom where the user equals 1. Well, we already had the user type of custom, so we just change this to admin, save this, rerun the query, and what we're going to see that now, if we refresh the database, that now for user 1, the type is admin. And just note here, you can also execute the update method on the result itself. So what I mean by that, we could, for example, say we want to find a single user. So let's say user with ID, let's select ID 17. And for user 17, what we have in the type is custom. So we can just set it back to something like client again. Run this. If we check now, what happens in the debugging logs is that we first try to find the user with ID 17, and then we're running the updates query. And now if we refresh the database, we're going to see that for user 17, we now have a type client. Now, additional method what you can call to update entries is called update all. And what update all does, it first of all fetches all the result instances, constructs them, and then updates these entries one by one through calling the update method on the result instance. So if we just remove the find and call the update all, and we rerun the script, what we're going to see that first of all, we are selecting all the users, and then we're updating all these entries by setting the type equals to client. And DBIx is actually quite smart here because we see that in our database, we have 2 entries, but for one of these entries, which is user ID 17, we already have the type of client. So DBIx didn't update all the entries and set the type to client. It only updated those entries for which the type isn't set to client, which was admin in our case. So if we refresh the page now, we're going to have type client for all of these entries. And it only ran the update statement for that one entry. For example, if I change this to admin, that means that now in the database for all the entries we have type client. So DBIx is going to fetch all the entries, it's going to check what is the current existing type, and it's going to set the new type to the admin from client. So if you rerun the script, we're going to see that we're starting a transaction again, we're selecting all the entries, and we're updating the type to admin for both of the entries now, because the type before was client. And as you can see, these are the key difference between calling the update method and update all. So update executes the SQL directly against the database behind the scenes, whereas the update all is going to first fetch the entry, construct the result, and is going to call the update method on that specific entry if the values that we're updating changes. Now another update method, what we can call, is called update or create. And as the name implies, DBIx is either going to update existing entry or is going to create one if one doesn't already exist. And similar as we have with the single method, we can also supply an optional key as a second argument. And that optional key is going to be the unique constraint that the DBIx should look at in order to figure out if the entry already exists or not. So we can say key, and for key, again, we provide unique constraint that we can get either by running the database structure check through update or create statement, or we can go to our user result and we check the unique constraint there, which is unique user username in our case. If we set that as unique constraint, we can say now that we want to update the type to, let's say, admin for the username. So username, and let's say user1, save this, run the script. And as we can see here, since we already have all the types as admin from the previous queries, it's just going to select the entry, it's going to see that the type is already admin, and it's not going to update the entry. So what we can do, we can change the type to, let's say, client again, save this, run the query, and what we are observing now is that it selects an entry, it sees that the type has changed, and it's setting now the type to client from admin. And DBIx is already doing this because we have an entry in a database with username user1, and it knows that it shouldn't create a new entry because that column is unique. It should only update the value from admin to client. If we, for example, say we would like to change this to username user2 and set this to type client, and if we rerun the script, well, not user2, because if you check our database, we already have a user2, so we can say user3 and save that, rerun the script. What DBIx is going to do is going to first of all check if an entry with username user3 already exists, and since it doesn't, it's going to insert a new entry for user. If we refresh the database, we're going to see that now we have 3 users. The latest one being that we just now created with username user3 and the type client. So again, as the name implies, update or create either is going to update existing row if it could find an entry based on the unique constraint, or is going to create a new entry if it couldn't find already existing one. Now the last method I want us to look at is called update or new. And if we change from update or create to update or new, now this method is quite similar to the update or create. Now the only difference here is that instead of creating an entry if it doesn't exist, it's going to first of all construct a result instance on which we can check if the entry exists in the database. And if it doesn't, we can choose to insert it. What I mean by that is, so the return value now is going to be our note result. So my note equals schema result set. And if we save this, and now we also add some debugging and say note. And on this result, we can call a method in underscore storage. And here we can prepend this with a line something like is in storage question mark and append that to the result. And now if we save this and run the script, we're going to see that we are selecting from the user table based on the supplied username that we gave to update or new. And since we already have this entry in a database, it's going to say that this entry exists in a storage. And as you can observe, it doesn't call the update statement because the value of type doesn't really change. We already have this entry with the type client. So we can change this now to admin. Save the script, rerun it. What we're going to see that is that we're selecting from the database again, the entry exists, a new result instance is constructed, and update is being called on this result instance. And then we're getting back confirmation that this entry actually already existed in the storage, so we're not creating it, we are updating it. Now, for example, let's change this to user4, a username that we don't have in a database. Save the script, rerun it, and what we can see now what happens, we're running the select statement behind the scenes, we are constructing the result item, but now we can see that in storage is returning 0. So DBIx tried to look up this entry based on username user4. It doesn't exist in the storage. And the key takeaway here is that we don't see any statement that it actually inserts anything in the database. So if we go back and refresh the database, we're going to see that we still have 3 users. Now this is a small gotcha. So you must remember that update or new creates a new result instance, but it doesn't actually insert it if it's not in a storage on update request. In order to insert this in a database, what we can do is we can call note and method insert. So insert. If we save this, rerun the script, we're now going to see that DBIx is selecting from the user table. It couldn't find the user entry. We call the insert explicitly on the result instance, and we got back that now this entry exists in the storage. And if we refresh the database, we're going to see that now we have 4 items in the storage. And of course, you don't need to call the insert before debugging if the item is in storage. You could technically call this afterwards. For example, if the entry already exists in a database, then the inStorage method is going to indicate if it exists in a database. If it doesn't exist in the storage, then you can choose to insert it. So afterwards, if we just copy this line and add it after the first insert, and rerun the script again, and before that, let's just insert a new user with username 5, save this, rerun the script, and we're going to see that again we're selecting item. We know that this is not in a storage because this is new entry, there's nothing to update. We're explicitly calling that we want to insert this entry in the database, and now if we call inStorage method on our result, it's going to return 1 because we just inserted it before our second debugging statement, which is here. Alright, so that's it for this video. We looked at various methods and the differences of how you can update entries in a database through DBIx. I hope you found this video useful, and I'll see you at the next one.